We're able to finally get our hands on the latest White House spending budget, the $6 trillion, with a T, trillion dollar budget. And as a part of this budget, there is no mention of a fourth stimulus payment. Now, this bill does a lot of things. It increases regular government spending. It addresses infrastructure. It addresses soft infrastructure, the kind of things that help out families and food assistance and things like that that you may be interested in on a personal level. However, there is no mention of a fourth direct cash stimulus payment. So I wanted to cover a general overview of what is included within this spending proposal, and what we can expect in terms of the fourth stimulus payment, and what we can expect in the future, a realistic look at all this. Now, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news. I am just simply looking at the facts here, and I'm going to give you everything here as unbiased and realistic as possible, and then you can formulate your own opinion as to what our legislators should do. So in order to explain this, I have made a big old flow chart breaking down the major areas within this massive comprehensive spending bill. So we're going to cover the areas real quick. We can take a look at the flow chart. This is probably one of the weirdest charts that I have made, weirdest shaped charts. It looks a little bit intimidating, but we're going to blow right through this. You're going to know everything about the spending bill and about the future prospect of the fourth stimulus check. So let's go ahead and get started here. This is the future spending flow chart. First off, we have a new $6 trillion budget. Trillion. So let's talk about what is in this budget. First, starting with energy and the environment, we have $36 billion in investments to battle climate change, $171 billion for research to steer us away from dependence on fossil fuels, and $11.2 billion to the EPA. The defense budget increased, and there is some concerns about this on the left side of the spectrum. It has increased 1.6% to $715 billion. Transportation is seeing a lot, upgrading 20,000 miles of highways and streets, repairing 10,000 of our oldest and smallest bridges, funds to replace buses, rail cars, and post office vehicles, certain vehicles within those, not replacing all of them. And there is talk about electrifying post office vehicles, more funding to Amtrak as well. Education, there's a lot going on here, and this is where you can see some programs that may benefit you on a personal level. 4 years of additional free schooling, 2 years on the front, 2 years on the back. So that's 2 years for additional preschool schooling and 2 free years of community college schooling for all high school graduates, which would be an exciting program for those who want to get a degree but simply can't afford it. Also, more cash for college grants and larger Pell Grants, which is another form of college schooling grants. Funding for immigration, $4.3 billion in refugee services, and more funding for border security and immigration. Now, this is a general overview of what is included in this. Again, this is a $6 trillion package, so I'm not going to hit on every single granular detail, but we're just hitting the major areas here. Food and agriculture. The agricultural department is seeing a 16% increase in funding. Food assistance program funds increase to $6.7 billion. So this is assistance programs like SNAP and other nutrition assistance that may help individuals pay for their groceries. That is a 17.5% increase over the previous spending bill. The Justice Department, 5.6% increase to them. Increased funds for law enforcement and community relationships, so relationships between the police and the communities that they serve, funding for that in order to get a better connection, I suppose. Increased funding for domestic terrorism and violence against women. I'm not sure why they're paying for violence against women. Sorry, that was a bad joke. It's funding to prevent that. Terrible joke. Moving on. Cybersecurity, increased funding to modernize and secure technology. Space, a 6.3% increase in funding there. Home care services, $400 billion for caregiving on aging and disabled Americans, and increased wages for home health workers as well, so they would have a slightly higher minimum wage. We are seeing this in several different areas where there's a focus on certain sectors on increasing the minimum wage, and it seems like the method now, instead of just increasing the minimum wage to $15 an hour, is to start with sectors potentially and then work their way to a higher minimum wage for all. It seems like that's the process that they are attempting to take. Housing and water, $111 billion to water infrastructure within the US, $213 billion to housing renovation and retrofitting. Manufacturing, $300 billion to manufacturing and supply chain. Of course, we've had a lot of issues with supply chain in the past. There has been an executive order signed in the past, very recently by President Biden, on supply chains. However, that mostly directs research towards the issue and not funding towards the issue. Children. There is a lot going on here with children, so they would want to make permanent the enhanced child tax credit. This is the monthly benefit that is set to begin being paid out starting in July. So you would receive a $300 payment per child under the age of 6 and a $250 per month payment per child between the ages of 6 and 17. Now, as of right now, this will only last for 1 year. However, there are this bill and other proposals outlining to make that a permanent change. So that would happen all the time, every single month, monthly payments to families, which is a big one for families. There's a lot going on for families. Also make permanent the child daycare tax credits. That should say tax. Dang it. That should say tax. So there's a large tax credit right now for child care. And also make permanent the earned income tax credit and the expansions that we saw this year in the year of 2021. So they're trying to make all three of those permanent as a type of stimulus. Now, this isn't a direct cash stimulus, like there's $1,000 in your bank account, but these are stimulus type payments that would help lower income individuals as part of this comprehensive spending and infrastructure bill. And then, how will this all be paid for? And of course, you guessed it, taxes. So the corporate tax rate would increase from 21% to 28%. Sorry, my 8 looks funky. I accidentally wrote the wrong number there originally. The top capital gains tax rate would increase from 23.8% from the highest income earning individuals to a whopping 43.4%. Hello, Puerto Rico. You may want to consider going there with me if you're in that tax bracket. Unrealized capital gains will also be taxed at death with a $1 million exemption. So over $1 million, there could be some tax on unrealized capital gains after death, and also more tax enforcement. So they're working on building out their systems at the Treasury, at the IRS to enforce taxes, and they're estimating that that would give an additional $700 billion in tax revenue annually just from enforcing taxes a little bit more. Now, the White House believes that now is the time to spend a little bit more because the return on investment should happen within 15 years based on their estimates and the additional tax revenues that they receive. They think that that is the turning point. Within 15 years, they'll actually start decreasing the deficit from all of the spending. And they believe because interest rates are so low, we should capitalize on what's going on in the current environment and spend now, reap the rewards later, instead of trying to spend later when interest rates are potentially higher. Now, there are opinions all across the board on this. There are many people who are concerned about inflation, rightfully, and they even say that this would likely create some short-term inflation. However, there are other opinions saying this would dramatically increase inflation. Now, the Treasury keeps on saying that, hey, we're not so worried about inflation. We don't think that inflation is going to be that bad. I think that's cause for concern, just personally, because anytime anyone is like, no, I'm not worried about that, it makes me feel like they're not looking at it as deeply as they should. Like, there should be more eyes on it. Saying, nah, not a problem, kind of concerns me a little bit on the inflation end. And then no cash stimulus anywhere to be seen within that huge, comprehensive $6 trillion spending bill. But we do have support from certain Democratic Senate members, certain Democratic House members, members of the House Ways and Means Committee, which is arguably the most powerful committee within the House. And we have voters signing petitions with over 2 million individuals signing for specifically $2,000 reoccurring monthly stimulus payments. So there is support. However, there's not a whole lot of support. There's not news coming out every day. It's not like last year where there was this charge towards more stimulus payments happening. And this is why it's going to make it more and more difficult to see a stimulus payment happen if we're being completely realistic about what is going on in the economy. There's just not a new proposal every single day or every week like there once was. Yes, there's support, but just not quite as much support. And all this support that we've seen, the letters sent to Biden over the last several months, has not swayed the White House nor promoted a flurry of new proposals. And here's the potential future as I see it. Now, this is just my opinion. Of course, there may be other people who are more educated on this who feel differently. You may feel differently on this. Is just taking in all the information and trying to present it as factually as possible. Right now, there's a large focus on current infrastructure bills. Of course, they want to get these bills passed. There's very little support on the Republican side to get them passed. So in order to pass them, they may need to do so through budget reconciliation and kind of just pushing the Republicans to the side. Now, again, along with the low interest rates, they're kind of seeing right now as an opportunity where Democrats control everything everything, and they may be able to use this opportunity to seek their longer term goals where they may not be able to do that again in 2 or 4 years from now. There are negotiations with Republicans on these infrastructure bills. However, current proposals from Republicans are far lower than the Democratic benchmarks. So if we know anything about negotiations, it may take a while before there's a middle met, or Democrats just may go ahead and do this without them. And stimulus relief is unlikely unless we see significant declines in unemployment, GDP, and consumer confidence. Now, we did see an increase in unemployment from March to April, a slight increase, which pushes us towards the marker of more stimulus a little bit more, but it was a very slight increase. Now, if we see another increase in unemployment from April to May, now that report should come out on Friday. It usually comes out on the first Friday of a new month. If unemployment has increased dramatically, this could mean the odds for another stimulus payment increase dramatically as well, because that is the biggest marker that they look at when they're trying to determine the health of the economy. So that is something to keep your eyes open for next week. So I hope that you appreciate me breaking down what is going on in this spending bill, a realistic outlook of the future of the stimulus and what to keep an eye out on if you are banking on more stimulus payments. And I would just like to thank you for watching, and I hope you have a profitable day.